Let's just do a little practice. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Jesus is. 2.
Don't drift away.
Excellent. 3.
Better than Moses.
Moses. 4. God's rest. 5.
Better high priest.
What?
High priest. Better than high priest.
Better high priest. 6.
Hope is the anchor of the soul.
Hope is an anchor. 7. Oops, I gave it to you.
Better priest.
Better priesthood. 8. Better covenant. 9.
Sanctuary.
Serves the high priest.
Better tabernacle. Better sanctuary. Excellent. 10. Here's chapter.
Once for all.
Jesus is the perfect sacrifice. Better sacrifice. Chapter 11.
Chapter of faith.
Hall of Fame of Faith. Today's chapter 12.
Run with endurance.
Run with endurance. Don't give up. Never give up. And we're so close. Chapter 13. Who's looked ahead? Jesus asked for what? Better service. Better service. Okay. So here's an easy way to remember it. In this list obviously is not inspired. This is just kind of what Mitch and I picked to do this. But there are 8 betters in this list, right? Better than angels, Moses, high priest, priesthood, covenant, tabernacle, sacrifice, and service. There are 8 betters. There you go. Just 8 words to remember those chapters. And there are 5 what I might call imperatives, admonitions, things to say. Don't drift away. Enter God's rest. Hope is an anchor. Faith makes it to God, and never give up. Right? So think about those as you do this, because those really, in some ways, are real high-level lessons of the book of Hebrews. So, given we've already had the first bell, not the first bell, but the starting bell, we're already behind. What did we learn? We covered it up here. What did we learn about all these faithful that are named explicitly in the book of Hebrews? What did we learn about them?
They're just like us.
Just have flaws.
Just like us, they have flaws. They started at different places. Some of them had struggles. Some of them had struggles throughout their entire life, even struggles with sin, right? And yet, what did we learn about them? Despite all of those things,
They persevered.
they persevered, and they persevered when they showed what?
Faith.
When they showed faith. When they actually showed that they believed God and they trusted God. And that led them to have endurance. And we were finishing up last time with that, remember that nameless list of people that was there, and we talked about them? There was a group of people that weren't named, they were described, and they were people who trusted God and they overcame and actually saw rewards. They overcame armies, they did all sorts of things that showed them great reward in this world. And then there was a group of people who trusted God, and what happened?
They got killed.
They died. But they trusted God all the way up to their death. They showed that faith even when God did not rescue them from an earthly trial. They still trusted God in doing that. And so I actually just went through, I started trying to go, well, who are some of these people? We talked about some of these names that weren't on this list. But they were amongst those unnamed people. Think about Esther and how she trusted God. Think about Elisha. We talked about Elijah. Think about Elisha. And doing that. Think about the widow of Zarephath that Elisha actually served. And the Shunammite woman that were there. Zechariah the son of Jehoiada. Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah, who are commonly known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Young men, early in their faith, who stood up, thought they were going to die. Didn't change a thing. They ended up not dying for that, but look at that. When you go through your Old Testament and you read these different names that are there, are they there for a reason? Let's just jump right off of Sean's lesson this morning. The Hebrew writer brought these out. He said, there's a whole bunch of people I didn't name. We can go through and start writing up names. We could have written down a whole lot more names. When God names somebody, we have to look at them. What do we learn from that person? How can we bring that forward into our life? And then who amongst the unnamed is also there? Were only the people named in the Old Testament the only ones that were saved? No. There were countless that weren't named that served God. Think about our lesson that we had here with Jordan. Think about Elijah on the mountain, right? after he went from the mountain, he said, "Woe's me, Lord. I'm the only one serving you." And what did God tell you?
7,000.
There were about 7,000 that aren't serving, but the Baals either. You're not alone. And then he said, "Get up and get to work." You know, there's Elijah, his weakness. He got into the woe is me thing. I get to that. Just get up and get to work. There's a whole bunch. None of those 7,000 are named except as a group, 7,000. So, the world was not worthy of those people. The world's not worthy of people who strive to show faith in God, who trust Him. Because the world is not striving to show faith in God and trust Him. That's what makes them unworthy. It also makes them candidates to learn how to become worthy. They don't become worthy on their own, they become worthy by having that faith in God. And so, we end that chapter, that great Hall of Fame of faith, and this is supposed to be like going to the National Football Hall of Fame, right? Or the Cooperstown Hall of Fame. Remembering all these great things in the past and these great players, right? Is there a point to all of this? Other than the lessons we've talked about here, the endurance that's there, that they showed?
We can do it too, if they can.
There is, and guess what? Chapter 12 starts with one of those words, right? What's the big word that chapter 12 starts?
Therefore.
Therefore. So remembering all your lessons we've learned from all of this, therefore what? This image here, isn't it? That's just an image we draw. That's the closest I can get to something that I put on the screen to remind us. Seeing we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Okay, the Hebrew writer is writing to a group of people who understood sports. They understood stadiums. That's exactly the words he used when he says we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witness, and he talks about running a race. They knew exactly what that meant. Are we familiar with sports and stadiums and what goes on there? Okay. So talk to me about this image that the writer picks. Who are these witnesses?
The ones named in chapter 11.
How's that? How is that?
They're in heaven with God.
So certainly we have that. I'm not even going to. Are they really there looking at us and watching exactly what we're doing in our lives or not? I don't know. This verse doesn't say yes and it doesn't say no. It doesn't. It could be offered in the sense of if we said something today, you know, our founding fathers are looking down on us in the election to see whether or not the system they put in place is true or not. Are they really? I don't know. It could be offered as a figure of speech. It could be. Is that the point of this? Is this the point about what our status will be when we go on through that door, like our sister Evelyn did? Is that the point of this verse? What's the point of this verse? What's the central point of this verse?
Their lives were witnesses for us to follow.
Right. So that we can do what?
So we can win the race with endurance.
What did these cloud of witnesses who are here do? They finished the race by showing endurance through troubles. I think all these things we wrote down about all the people that we can analyze here. They finished the race by showing an endurance through troubles. Wow. What does he say about this race? I only put part of this verse up here. So tell me about the race. What's some words in this passage, chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, that strike you?
Endurance.
One with
Can't
endurance.
quit.
Endurance. Do we know what that looks like in a physical race or a physical sports game that we would watch? Yeah, I mean, how many games have to go all the way to the end until we actually know what's decided, right? How many obstacles show up at the last minute? How many obstacles show up early in it? What happens to the ones who quit in the race early? I mean, this young lady won a marathon. What happens if she quit early? She's not going to be standing here, right? She's not going to be standing here. Okay, so endurance is one of those things there. What else about this?
Persistence.
Okay, persistence, another part of endurance is just that you really just have to keep, I mean, I'll just tell you, I couldn't run a marathon. This is a marathon race. I couldn't run a marathon. I'd like to walk one. I don't know if I could walk one in a day. But if I train to do it, what do you think?
You might.
Might. I know lots of people who at my age have started, and at my age and my weight, have started training to do that and have figured out how to finish it. They might not be the first to cross the line, but they figured out how to finish it.
Says you have to lay aside every weight.
Okay, absolutely. We're going to talk some more about that every minute. But there are things that can keep us from getting through to the end of this race, right? There's weights, there's sin, there's things that can weight us down. If we're carrying around a bunch of stuff that we don't need, we might not finish this race. What about the races in this verse that's on the screen? I don't like this game. I'm going to play another game. Which race do we have to finish?
The one where we
The one
picked.
that's set before us.
The one that's set before us. We're in it, right? Whether we picked it or not, but I get your point, Tony. The race that's set before us. You ever walked a road that you didn't really want to be on for the Lord? Wish I could get off this road? So has God put things in front of your life and my life that are difficult to deal with? God, just give me another road. I don't like this road. No, we're going to talk about this. We end up on roads sometime that require endurance, and there's a reason they require endurance. But that's what we have to think about here. How do these witnesses give feedback to the runner who's running the race? In a stadium, we know how that happens, right? They cheer. You hear the cheers that spurs up. I've seen that happen. Teams or runners or people get new energy because of just the cheering in the stadium. Through the scriptures. Do all these witnesses speak to us?
Yeah.
They do. If we do what? Lesson from this morning. Open the scriptures. Listen, understand, know that, hey, I identify with this person, or wow, look what they overcame. I can do that as well. It truly is, if we're going to hear the cheers that are encouraging us, what do we have to do? Open our Bibles. What were the Hebrews admonished for not doing enough of in chapter 5? This time you should have been teachers. You need to be taught. What does that mean? Were they just not mentally capable?
They didn't study enough.
They weren't getting in it. They weren't really getting in there enough and looking at that.
You know, Craig, I have a real good example of that. Sometimes I bring people with me from where I live. I live in an independent living facility. And they don't understand the thing that's being said. Neither in class nor in services. They just don't understand it. But I say, well, come over to my apartment and let's have a Bible study. Well,
If they don't want to, who are they not like this morning? They're like the Bereans, right? And if we're not doing that, who are we like?
they just...
Well, we're not like the Bereans, right?
But it's so frustrating. And I know it was for the Hebrew writer. Just totally frustrated. Look, we can do this. If you just come over and listen and we'll research, but no.
1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter, gives us a different description of this same image. Beginning in verse 24. Do you not know that those who run a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way to obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. Yes, we can help each other run this race. What Paul's saying there. I got to run with endurance, and I've got to bring my body under discipline in order to make sure it happens here. So let's talk about the rest of the things that are in this scripture. I thought this was supposed to come up one at a time. I must have messed up how I put this together. Doesn't matter. We'll go aside here. We've talked about the witnesses. Lay aside the weights. Go.
Just real quick, what passage is chapter 9 in 2 Corinthians?
1 Corinthians 9, verses 24.
1 Corinthians 9?
Yeah, 24 to 27. Yeah, thanks. I might misspoken that. He says, lay aside the weights. What are those?
The world and
Okay.
sin.
Okay, I'm going to focus us here because he says next, lay aside sin. So what are the weights that aren't sin?
Worries,
Worries, junk,
guilt,
guilt.
Jealousy.
Those are kind of sin. Jealousy is. Good things. We're going to segment these a little bit. What are the weights that would weigh us down?
doubts.
Doubt. Doubt can become sin. No.
At my age, I can see the end. And I'm tired. But that doesn't give me any excuse to stop.
Okay.
So we have to just realize, that it's there. We can do this with God's help. Don't give up. And that is, for me, one of the things now, because it would just be so easy to stay at home instead of getting in my car, getting dressed, getting in my car, get here, have to park a block and a half from the building and and walk that far. And I don't walk much. But I can't let things like that bother me.
Very, very well said. Have you ever heard of the writer C.S. Lewis? He wrote Chronicles of Narnia. Very, very interesting writer. C.S. Lewis wrote a book one time. I'm just going to read a quote and give you a little context. It's called The Screwtape Letters, and it's about a demon who's teaching his nephew demon how to get Christians, how to turn them. What do you do to Christians in order to get them off track? Okay. So it's kind of an odd book. He writes it from the perspective, when he talks about the enemy, he's talking about God, because he's on the side of the devil, right? So that's what he's supposed to do. So just listen to what C.S. Lewis wrote here about how would one devil teach another how to get a Christian, okay? Use a good book, which he really likes, to keep him from his prayers, or his work, or his sleep. A column of advertisements in yesterday's paper will do. You can make him do anything. You can make him just do nothing at all for long periods of time. Keep him up late at night. Not partying, just staring at a dead fire in a cold room. Okay, what's C.S. Lewis pointing here when he talks about that?
Having down priorities.
Yeah. Now, he's using a book and a newspaper. What's that in our world?
Smartphones.
They're distraction.
Our phones.
TV shows.
Doom scrolling the news, right? TV, what's worse than TV? I would actually in front of us right now.
Binging, streaming.
Netflix,
TikTok.
YouTube, TikTok.
I don't watch any of that, so I don't know.
Good for Nelma, but don't even start.
Don't start.
Is there anything wrong if you watch a good movie on Netflix?
No.
No. What's wrong? When can that become a weight?
If you stay home and do it instead of come here.
Could be. What if you just do it 5 or 6 hours a night? I'll catch up on my reading tomorrow.
Yeah, that's bad.
Think about this runner here. You think she'd run the race with a 50-pound backpack on? No, she wouldn't be doing that there. Making that happen. That would not be the goal of doing that. When the writer says lay aside the weights, he's not talking about the sins. He talks about that next. He's saying, what's weighing you down? What's keeping you back? If we need to understand how these witnesses are cheering to us, we need to be in the Word and studying and understanding and talking to one another and receiving encouragement. And if we're not, if we're in the media, we're in all those other things, we're in other distractions, we're in our social clubs or whatever, you name it. He's not talking about things that are wrong. He's talking about okay things that go wrong in our lives, that take up too much time and presence. That's a tough one for me, boy. 'Cause I tend in that direction. I got all these things I'm interested in, some of which are things of the Bible. Now, lay aside the sin which so easily besets us. Is it possible to try to run this race and hold on to a sin or two that we kind of have a hard time giving up? Just for me. And this is a weight. This is a big weight. In fact, how big is this weight of sin if we don't lay it down? It will. Why did Jesus come? Why are we following this example of faith? Because he actually lets us unweight the sin, right? Take it off. We get rid of that guilt of that sin. But we actually, in order to get rid of the guilt, we got to get rid of the sin too. We have to change. We have to repent and go with that. And it's only at that point that we can, verse 2, run with endurance. When we put all these things aside, now we're set up to actually be able to endure. Because now all of our strength can be pointed at overcoming the trials that we face and not divided into things that either are sinful or just are in fact have become wastes of our time. And then finally, he says what? Verse 2, the last thing on this chart here. We started with the witnesses. Where are we going to end up? Looking to Jesus. Now let's ask you this question. All these wonderful characters of faith, all the lessons we rightly learn from them, who's better? Jesus is better. Our whole theme of our class. Isn't it wonderful he ends up with, this will help you to hear the witnesses. So obviously you've got to go do this. But how are we actually going to get this endurance? We're going to have to look to Jesus.
But he
We're
lays it
gonna have
down
to.
step by step, so we have no excuse.
He actually does, and I think that's where I messed up my thing there. Okay. Look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Now I'm going to just do a quick little aside here. Don's not in the class, but if he were here, he would tell you that hour is not in the original language. And so it can be implied, it's actually not. I've done a lot of reading this. So really, I should have actually blacked it out, I didn't here. Jesus is the author and finisher of faith. What did Jesus' life show us? We talked in chapter 2 that he was the captain of our salvation. But what was the other word we used for that? Remember they used the word Mitch used?
Pioneer.
The pioneer. What did Jesus show? He was born. He lived a life of complete faithfulness to God. He suffered and died. What did Jesus have to endure? We'll talk about that in a minute, but we don't have to endure. A lot of things that we might have to endure, Jesus endured. He endured the cross. We're not going to have to endure that. We're not going to endure that separation from God. Where's Jesus now?
Right hand of God.
Where would faith take us if we endure this race? Jesus pioneered the entire path, and we can walk it right behind him with his help in doing that. Why do we look to Jesus? He's the one who showed it actually will happen. So we have to walk behind him. And so there's a whole bunch of things here. I won't take time for us to break them all down and ask through here. Think about the things that are said in verses 2 through 4. How did Jesus do this? Well, here's some clues for us. He saw what? The joy before him. He saw the end of the race. When he was in the race, he saw that. He endured. The very thing that he's asking the Hebrews, learn how to endure. Was it easy? Was Jesus shamed for his position as the Christ? Are we shamed as Christians sometimes? Is the world trying to shame us for holding on to values that they think are old-fashioned or not applicable? Is the shame fun? How did Jesus feel about the shame? He despised the shame. What do sometimes we as Christians let the shame do to us of being a Christian?
So
Stop. Quit. I don't want to feel this anymore. No. You don't have to like it, but I guess he still endured. He sat down at the right hand throne of God. We talked about that. And then because he actually says to the Hebrews, you haven't had to do these things yet, the implication is Jesus did. Jesus endured hostility from sinners. His entire life. I mean, it wasn't just the cross, right? How many Pharisees did he have good conversations with in his life?
9.
Nicodemus? How tired did Jesus get?
He got tired enough to mentor the Bible.
When he stood on that mountain and he looked at Jerusalem, what did he say? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I would have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her chicks, but you would not. He was tired. He was sad that they hadn't listened to him. He still overcame that weariness. He overcame discouragement of those things. How discouraged was he with his disciples? How many times did he have to tell them the same thing over and over again? And he said to the Hebrews, you have not yet striven to the point of death. What did Jesus do?
Agonizing death.
And was it his death that was so bad? I mean, I wouldn't want to have that death, but what was in his death? All the things that happened as he was dying and the world went dark, what were those, what's the Bible point to? What was in his death really?
The sins of the world. were
Separation,
gone.
right? Separation from God. Father, where are you?
Brett,
Go ahead.
I found it interesting that you have the same book. That word despise there is where we would get our phrase today, no big deal. To Jesus, shame, when we get shamed, we're ready to quit. With him, it was not a deal breaker. It was no big deal to him to be shamed to accomplish his mission.
Those I've talked to who are marathon runners will tell me, even the good ones, in the middle of every race, they start having muscles aching and wanting to cramp up and wanting to stop. And they push through it because they know if they do, they'll be able to finish the race. They think about those as no big deal. Nobody likes that pain when they're running that race, but they know it's just temporary. They can still finish it. I think that's the sense in which, yeah, when you sign up with Jesus in a world that's as wicked as ours is, and it's as always has been. Our world is no more wicked than anybody else's world was. When we sign up, we're going to get shamed. If we're not getting shamed, we might not be standing out. I mean, we like it, but we just got to say, we expect it. So, it's really no big deal. I get through this. This is all you got to throw at me? Huh. That's easy, right? That's easy in looking at that. Now, why does the author point out they had not yet struggled with bloodshed?
Because they hadn't.
They hadn't yet.
Yeah.
Did that mean they weren't going to? Hey, that's not bad. You haven't died yet for your faith. Were some of them going to?
So they probably knew people that already had.
Probably, yeah. Excellent point. Stephen? You knew about Stephen. About James. About James. Maybe about all the first century martyrs we can read about in history for doing that. Why had they not perhaps struggled yet to the point of bloodshed?
Because they weren't putting themselves in situations that would, potentially cause that. If they wanted to, I mean, there's a reason, let's use Paul as an example. He didn't go to the Galatians until the Holy Spirit told him to, because of, he potentially could have gotten killed just immediately.
It could have been not time for that.
Yeah.
It could be because they're starting to hide some as things get worse. Looking at that, they're looking at that. The scriptures tell us that we will not. In 1 Corinthians 10, beginning verse 12. Let's just read it. Therefore, him who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. Okay, that's us. We're here at church today. We're doing pretty good, right? Let's just start off. Let's put us in these next verses here. No temptation has overtaken you except as such as common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. But with the temptation will also make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. Now let's talk about that temptation in the face of death for being a Christian that these people face. What's the temptation when you're faced with that? Society beginning to turn on you to the point even that this society started killing Christians. What's the temptation, right?
Give up.
To give up, that's the first temptation.
Compromise, for sure.
Yeah.
To compromise, to hide, not physically. I mean, we know the Jews scattered from Jerusalem at the Romans. That was okay to just go somewhere else. But they went somewhere preaching the word, and in that case, God used that in order to make that happen. It could be the Hebrews weren't ready yet to face death because their faith was wavering. the test they were getting right then may have been building them up to the point at which they could face death. God will always provide a way of escape. Does that mean when the martyr's standing there about to go to the lion, that okay, there's a door over here in the Colosseum, I can slip out and God gives that way? What is sometimes the way of escape?
Death.
For them it was death. But going to death, how? How does that escape have to happen if it's even that bad? How does that escape have to happen? Run with endurance, the race is set, all the way to the end. Just like you were talking about now, getting tired. You may not be faced with physical death, but just with long life and tired and ready to go and the things that you say. And it's like, the way of escape is sometimes, you know what, we're going to walk through that door of death. Let's be ready. Let's be ready whenever God asks us to, whether it's at the mouth of a lion or whether it's in our own beds. That's the difficult thing here, that we have to be built up in order to endure what to the end, and therefore we are, and we're talking about that in the next section. Real quick, Scott and then Delma.
I think that in my own life and in congregation I've been a part of, myself, like the biggest thing that I see is like Peter, like what he would do, he was hypocritical in when he dealt with the Galatians and compromising that way versus something as extreme as, running away from somebody trying to kill me or something.
Now, we hope we don't face that. I'm not sure about that in the lifetime of our children, but that's another statement that Margie?
I'm Margie.
I'm sorry, Margie. I was,
That's okay.
I knew that.
I have a saying that it says God doesn't give us what we can handle. God helps us handle what we are given.
and that is exactly what Hebrews, the 12th chapter, verses 5 through 11 is about. What does Hebrews 12, 5 through 11 talk about? Pick one word from your study. What's it talk about? Chastening. Hebrews 12, 5 through 11. The chastening from God. Why is it so hard for us to endure in this life? We don't like to be chastened, do we? Okay. The Hebrew writer begins by pointing out to them, you should have known that you would face hardship as a Christian because you should have known what? The Scriptures. You should have known the Scriptures. You have forgotten, he says in verse 5, the exhortation which speaks to you as sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord. Anybody look up where that came from? Do not despise.
Proverbs 13.
Proverbs, the 3rd chapter. Yeah. Verses 11 and 12. You should know that if you're God's children, you're going to receive chastening. Now, this word chastening, we think about that. I don't like someone to tell me I'm doing wrong. I don't like somebody to I didn't like it when my dad spanked with me. Yeah, it was belt and switch sometimes. And doing that, I didn't like all those things. I was being punished. Is this word about punishment for wrongdoing, chastening? It actually is not. This chastening is about building discipline, building character, building moral values. That's really what the Greek word that was used here is actually pointing to. So when the Lord chastens us, what is He doing?
Strengthening us.
He's strengthening us. He's given us tests to overcome. Tests that we can overcome if we show endurance. And that is allowing us to build strength. If we're going to finish a race, we're going to finish a long marathon race, what do we have to do? We have to train. We have to build up. We have to get ourselves there. And God does exactly that for us. So why do we get difficult tests to go through? God deems we need them in order to grow and to strengthen. Now, why does the Lord train us?
So that we'll be worthy of heaven.
He wants us to be there, right? Exactly. He knows that He can forgive our sins, He can take us there, but He also knows we have to make it to the finish line. And that's how ultimately, it's what all these people taught us and what Jesus paved the way for, that if we're faithful unto death, that we actually can receive that. So He's training us there for doing that. What does the Hebrew writer call those who don't like their chastening? Who don't receive, I should say, their chastening?
They're not true children.
Illegitimate children.
Illegitimate children. There's an even worse word that I won't say here, not a curse word, but that's what, because you all know that a father disciplines the children he loves. The children that go undisciplined are not the ones that he loves. Have you ever thought, when I face a hardship, not one of my own making because of my own sin, but even in that case, with my own sin, means I've got to learn something to grow out of it. Have you thought when you face that? God's showing His love for you? It's a whole different way to think of it. A whole different way to think of it here. Well, we're gonna finish this up next Sunday. We've got singing on Wednesday night. So we kind of had, I knew I had 2 longer sessions here. So we didn't get quite as far. I wanted to get a little bit farther, but we're gonna make it out of this session. We're gonna talk about why we endure, because we are going to Nelma's favorite spot. We're going to Zion in verse 18 of this chapter, finishing up the chapter here. So appreciate all your participation today, and we'll see you